Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Ghost Stories and Folklore. Tonight, I am going to tell you about a haunted location that most of you probably held a picture of in your hand and didn't realize it. I will be talking about the home of Thomas Jefferson Monticello. And why do I say you have held it in your hand before? Well, Monticello is currently memorialized on the back of a U.S. nickel. I am not going to cover too much history about this location, although I will say the original plantation of Thomas Jefferson was once 5,000 acres in Albemarle County, Virginia, which he inherited from his father, Peter Jefferson. At age 25 in May of 1768, young Jefferson began to level the top of the mountain, and he decided to name his home Monticello, which means Little Mountain in Old Italian. Over the next 40 years, he designed and redesigned his home and plantation. What I do want to focus on in this video is the many reports and paranormal claims I have found, some of which will definitely make you think twice about visiting this location. Well, maybe not for those who look for these type of things. The first report I have found was from a woman who visited the home several years ago. While her and her husband was on a guided tour, they were in the room that was said to be used by children as a playroom and nursery. While the tour guide was speaking, she felt like someone gently bit her on her left shoulder. It was so shocking that it made her body jerk slightly. She reported that she felt the mouth, teeth, and warm air being exhaled on her shoulder. At first she thought it was her husband goofing around, but when she turned to look at him, he was simply standing there listening contentedly to the tour guide. When they were finished with their tour, she asked him why he bit her on the shoulder. He thought she was crazy, since he really wasn't even close to her the whole time they were in that room. Another report comes from another person on the tour. They claim that while they were in the study, which had a doorway to Thomas Jefferson's bedroom, which, by the way, this is the room where he passed away, they felt the sensation of a force that was trying to either enter or pass through their body. It frightened them so much that they moved to the back of the room, but whatever it was followed them. They paced a while back and forth and got very anxious before the feeling left them a few minutes later. They claim that they have never felt anything like that before or since. Another woman reported that while her and her husband was on the tour in about the same location, she felt something lifting a piece of her hair. Again, she thought it was her husband, and she turned to tell him to stop it. But her husband just looked at her confused and asked, "Stop what?" He didn't have a clue what she was talking about, and she reports that he was even on a different side of her when it happened. A former employee and curator of the home reported back in the early 1990s, when they worked there, they would sometimes be in the house working by themselves late at night, sometimes until over 11 p.m. They would often get the feeling as if somebody was looking over their shoulder watching what they were doing, particularly in the hallway to the right of the entrance hall. They would also hear doors slamming up on the third floor, but there was nobody else in the house at the time, and they were down on the first floor. This former employee also reported that their grandparents also used to live up on the mountain in the caretaker's cottage, which is now the business office. And after the parents were married, they would sometimes go up and visit them up on the mountain. Late in the evening, they would see lights up in the big house and hear music playing. But as soon as somebody would open up a window to try to hear better, the music would stop and the lights would go out. There is also a report from a man that recounts a conversation that he had one time with an older gentleman that was dressed in period clothing around the Monticello cemetery. As the story goes, when he was a little boy, he visited Monticello with his family one fall weekend. There were hardly any visitors at the place at the time, and he snuck away from his parents who were in the garden area. He made his way down the path and came across the cemetery. Of course, as a curious little boy, he didn't fully understand why the cemetery had a locked iron gate fence around it, and he decided he wanted to get a closer look. So he forced his way between the iron bars and slipped his way through the fence. It was a major task to get through, and it did hurt a little bit, so much so that he didn't want to even try to attempt to get back out. He tried calling for help several times. However, he was so far away from anyone else, nobody heard him calling. He turned and saw this older gentleman approaching him, dressed in the period clothing. The older man sat down on one of the headstones and began to speak with him with a gentle voice, asking him various questions about his school and his friends and his family. It was a very calming conversation for the little boy, and it relaxed him and calmed him down. But in mid-conversation, the older man just looked up and said to him, "You're going to be okay now. Here comes your mother." Just then, the little boy turned around to find his mom running down the hill towards the cemetery, very upset and yelling for help. Knowing that he was in trouble, he was going to turn back to the older gentleman and ask him what he should do so he wouldn't get in trouble. The only problem was, the old man was now gone. Once home to the former President Thomas Jefferson, many believe that the Monticello is still haunted by him. Besides these stories I told you about here, my friends, other visitors have heard whistling in the gardens and throughout the house, which is historically reported what Thomas Jefferson used to do when he was thinking hard about something. And some have claimed to have been approached by a gentleman fitting Jefferson's description, who would ask them what they were doing on the property, or even offering comforting help to those who need it. If you like this episode of Ghost Stories and Folklore, be sure to hit the like button. And if you would like more videos from Panady Videos in the future, make sure you hit the subscribe and the bell for notifications, if you dare. Ha 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 ha.